Louise Regan. Thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Good to be here.
Thank you, dear Louis. As you follow the latest news, Kurdish leader Mr. Abdullah Öcalan has been visited by DEM party representatives. And also, Mr. Öcalan's message was very clear and to the point. If the ground is prepared, I have the enough power to bring conflict to the peaceful negotiations table. How do you evaluate this message? First, how important it is, and as also the Öcalan's proves that he is on the peace side. How would you like to comment on that very shortly, first of all?
I mean, I think it's been clear really all of the time that he is committed to peace and wants peace for people in the region. And I think it's important that is listened to really, and that he is allowed to take part in any negotiations or any discussions around how peace is reached for the people there, because I think without that it will be very difficult.
Thank you, dear Luis. Secondly, this is another question connected with the first question. Yes, the party representatives visited Öcalan, but Turkish government still applies isolation harshly on Öcalan, and lawyers or family visits to him is not allowed yet. In Turkey, main headlines now is the visits to the Öcalan, but how is it possible to talk about peace while still Öcalan is under isolation? In this frame, how do you see that, and what is your call to break the isolation on Öcalan to create the peace negotiations table?
I mean, I have spoken a lot about this, and obviously across the international community, there has been lots of concerns raised about the ongoing isolation, the fact that there has been no access to family members, to lawyers, which are, fundamentally human rights abuses. And, obviously we will continue to speak out about that. I think you cannot and will not get a successful peace negotiations without, firstly, the isolation being lifted and full access to family members and to legal representation being allowed, but also, as we have discussed previously, for the detention to be lifted completely.
Thanks to you, Luis. So just to see the examples from world, when we're looking at to the conflicts resolutions around the world, such as as an example of the South Africa or Ireland, where should we place the discussions that have been ongoing in Turkey over the past 4 months regarding Öcalan and the Kurdish issue? In this context, what consequences will arise from either arranging or not arranging the conditions for leader Öcalan to act as the one of the main negotiators?
I mean, I think it's very clear, and historically, if you look at other places where there has been conflict and negotiations have taken place, if you do not involve all the parties effectively in those negotiations, it's much less likely that they will be successful, because people do not feel confidence that their voices are being represented or that their issues are being heard or listened to. So I think it is absolutely essential. And, we see at the moment in other areas, our government here, for example, yesterday announcing that any negotiations around what is happening currently in Ukraine must have the Ukrainians at the center of it. And it's the same principle. Our government should be speaking out in all situations to ensure that people who are affected are at the center of the negotiations.
Thank you, Lois. We have little more time, so you can answer little longer, no problem. So the other important question is, you are among those who have supported the global freedom for Öcalan and political solution for Kurdish question campaign. This campaign has made a significant impact both internationally and in Turkey and Kurdistan as well. In this framework, historic developments are taking place right now. So Leader Öcalan has responded to these developments with a move aimed at resolving the Kurdish issue and bring peace and democracy to the Turkey and Middle East. So in that light of all these developments, how will the campaign should be proceed? What kind of contributions will it make to the process, and what else needs to be done?
Mm. I mean, I think it's a very important point, and there has been not only in the UK but, as you say, internationally support um, around this. But I do think I sort of was thinking about this earlier that there have been so many other issues globally. And so, rightly so, people have focused on significant events that have been happening. For example, obviously the genocide in Gaza and other things. And I think we probably need to think about what we do within our campaigning around this issue here in the UK. And obviously others within their communities across the globe need to think about, well, what do we now need to do? Obviously, we've had a campaign for a long time around the rights to freedom and for release from solitary confinement. But now I think the situation is developing, and I think it would be a good time for us to think about how particularly the trade union movement, who obviously here in the UK have been at the heart of this, how we get ourselves back together, how we talk about what are we going to do next, what are our next steps, and how we continue to educate people about the situation. Because I still think, and I have said this before, that people often are very unaware about what is happening, and they see and hear things in our mainstream media, but don't always know the wider context or know the reality of what is happening, particularly for the Kurdish community there. So I think those are very important things for us to sort of think about and start to focus around.
Thank you, Louis. You mentioned that the education about the situation is very important. So, in that case, just before the last question, would like to ask you how important is the international solidarity with the Kurds right now? What's happening in the Middle East and freedom for Öcalan?
I mean, I think it's vital. And as I say, I think because there have been other very significant global events, it may be that people haven't been quite as focused on it. So I think it is time for us to think about how we refocus our attention, particularly because we know that the situation is not brilliant across Turkey for a number of reasons. So I think it is important that we look at what more we can say, how we can engage with our trade union members particularly, and what actions we ought to be calling for, particularly putting pressure on our government here, obviously, but more widely ensuring that our government does take action around what is happening.
Thank you so much, dear Louis. Lastly, what are the attitudes of the international powers so far regarding the attack of the Turkish state and its support for the jihadist groups in Syria? As you know, the HTS and SNA, Syrian National Army, are totally moving together with the Turkish army in Syria now. So, do you find it sufficient, the international reactions? Is there enough reaction from the international powers what's happening in Syria right now, and what should be the future of the Syria?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is very limited reaction from what I see. So I think, it is concerning. It's often the case that these issues, particularly in that region, are not raised by our governments. And there is not enough challenge around what is happening. So I think, again, it sort of ties back to my last point, really, that our job as trade unionists and as people who are supporting the Turkish and Kurdish community in terms of their push for democracy, need to make sure that we are raising this, that we are, lobbying our politicians, that we are talking to people about what is happening, to put more pressure on really, and to ensure that our government does start to speak out and does start to raise these issues. I think that is vitally important, really.
Thank you so much, dear Louise Regan. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for your valuable comments and your solidarity with the Kurdish community.
No problem. Very good to see you again. Take care.
Thank you.